Hello everybody, this is Fernando for the latest Cryptids and Monsters video. Alright, it is that time. Let's go ahead and let's share another chapter 7 in this case, of the wonderful Through a Misted Glass book by Dr. David Marsh. I've seen the comments that people have posted on the past videos. People are really liking this series, so I'm definitely happy to share more information on it. Only a few more chapters left. I know I wish there was an infinite amount to showcase here, but we do have at least a few more, so let's go ahead and I'll share those throughout the coming days. This one has to do with a case involving a man visiting Australia and then experiencing either a cursed or haunted set of mountains. I've kind of touched upon that before in one of my past videos where there was a set of mountains that people almost believe have a supernatural aspect to them. If you haven't had a chance to see that video, I'll include the link for it below. And as always, I'll include the link for the book, Through a Misted Glass. That way you can download it for free. You can read the whole book yourself, and again, I highly recommend doing so. So let's go ahead and let's share chapter 7 here. And then as always, I'll give my own thoughts and opinions on it afterward. So here's this story. Toby had long dreamed of leaving Nebraska and visiting Australia. It was his ambition to go and see the outback, meet some Australian girls, drink Australian beer, and camp and hike places the tourists never saw. His two best friends, Tyler and Corey, also loved the idea of going to the land down under, so all three saved for 2 years, and in that year between high school and college, went to Australia. They planned on a month backpacking all over the country and seeing the places most tourists didn't see. While passing through Cooktown in Queensland, they saw the Trevethan Mountains on the map and asked locals about camping and hiking there. People told the boys that this was rugged and unforgiving territory that had claimed the lives of many people. Some spoke of a strange, terrifying beast called the Queensland tiger that roamed the deep and steep crevasses and huge black granite boulders of Black Mountain and of gigantic pythons that lived in the caves. This only intrigued those boys more. Some of the more experienced bush hunters and station hands told the boys it was no joke, that to go there was a huge risk. Experienced people and inexperienced alike never came back from there. They all said the boys were ill-advised to go there. It was too easy to become disoriented in among those black rocks, caves, and deep crevasses, and an injury could mean death, as there was no immediate help out there. All of this only served to further excite the boys. They would see the real Australia. In a last effort to dissuade the boys, a few old-timers told them of the curse of the Black Mountain. The curse went that those who entered not only risked their life and limb, but if they should enter the caves, they would also risk madness. No one knew why, but for as long as people could remember, the few people who did survive the caves were never the same after. The old-timers said it was best to see Black Mountain from a distance. They couldn't elaborate as to the nature of the madness, but the boys could see they were clearly serious about the issue. They did, however, relate the long and tragic history of the mountain. Many unexplained and mysterious disappearances have been attributed to these Black Mountains. Both humans and cattle have wandered into the Black Mountains and disappeared without a trace, never to return. The first record of a mysterious disappearance was in 1877. A station hand on horseback was out searching for some cattle that had strayed into the mountains. He, along with his horse and cattle, were never seen again. 13 years later, Constable Ryan, stationed at Cooktown, tracked a wanted criminal to the scrub at the edge of the mountains. He ventured into one of the caves, and both he and the criminal disappeared without a trace. Later, a prospector named Wren went in and never came out. Then Harry Owens, a local station owner of Oakey Creek, rode his horse over towards Black Mountain early one morning, looking for stray cattle. When he failed to return, his partner informed the local police sergeant and went looking for Harry. Both men failed to return, and the police conducted a massive search of the mountain in an attempt to find them. Two Aborigine police officers entered one of the caves. One of them came out and was so unnerved by his experience that he could not give a clear account of what had actually happened to him. In 1932, Harry Page disappeared and was found dead after a search by an Aborigine tracker. Two young men set out to solve the mystery behind the disappearances. They also were never seen again. Aborigine trackers went in after them, but even they disappeared into the mysterious mountains. All disappearances were thoroughly investigated by local police, who combed the mountains in search of the missing persons. No bodies or even evidence that they were ever there has ever been found. The general thought is that they fell into one of the many deep crevasses amongst the boulders, or became disoriented and got lost in the maze of caverns beneath. An old Aborigine among those trying to dissuade the boys told them that no Aborigine would even approach those mountains. The Aborigines call it Kau Kajaka, or Mountains of Death, and native legend had it that back in the age when the human race was young, there dwelt among the tribe in the vicinity of the mountain range a terrible medicine man whose name meant eater of flesh. So great was this craving for human flesh, and so great was the dread that superstitious tribesmen felt before his powerful magic, it was known to spirit away even a strong man, that they sometimes allowed him to eat an old woman or a diseased tribesman. One day, however, being very hungry, he overstepped his boundaries and partook of a young chief, whom he found asleep. Caught in the act, the tribe rose up against him, but an evil spell helped him change into a monstrous snake. Hissing away, he made his home in the very heart of the barren and desolate Black Mountain. Only hunger could drive him out. Ever since then, people as well as animals have been disappearing there. The boys considered all of this, but Toby thought it was just all tourist trap, at least hype. Corey and Tyler were more reserved, and they voted to err on the side of caution and just go out that way and camp near, but not in the mountains. Toby laughed at them, but agreed when they became more adamant against his arguments. The next day they were headed the 26 kilometers south towards those mountains. So they drove south, watching the rock-strewn mountains become larger and larger. They had to take several cattle roads and dirt tracks to get closer, but soon found a suitable place to camp. They set up their tents, cooked a dinner, and had a few beers, talking late into the night. They turned into the sounds of winds in the scrubs and were soon fast asleep. Sometime in the middle of the night, a frightening sound, not a scream or a growl, but something in between, something almost triumphant, woke them. They spoke from inside their tents to each other, wondering what could make such a sound and where it was, and the rest of the night passed in fitful sleeps for the three. Early the next morning, as the others slept, Toby went for a run and wound his way towards the black boulders. He was determined to see what had made that awful set of noises last night. He stopped as the sun rose and surveyed the area carefully. He was no tracker or even a good woodsman, but he felt that during the day, if he didn't go too far into the rocks, he'd be okay. He just wanted a peek. And so he went into the boulders, not too far, and looked for anything that would give him a clue as to what lived here. He saw a few goannas and heard rooks calling their mournful cry, but then he saw a track. It was almost as big as his hand and looked like a dog print to Toby. He looked further and found another, then another, and he followed them. He rounded a big rock and saw a shallow crevasse in front of him. Whatever made that track clearly went down, and so Toby did too. At that bottom he found more tracks, many more in fact, all coming up and down the floor of the crevasse. He opted to go deeper into the crevasse, and not long after, he spied the mouth of a cave. He stood debating whether to go in and have a quick look or go back. By now, the sun was well overhead and it was hot. Toby had no water and no compass, but decided to have a quick look in the cave and then retrace his steps before his friends got too worried. He stepped inside and paused to let his eyes adjust to the dark. A few moments later, he thought he could see a dim light further in and carefully went along the passage to find out what made that light. He passed an intersection and then entered a cavern. It was not a huge cavern, but it was filled with boulders. A small path wound between them, and then above, the ceiling broke through and a shaft of light fell to the floor below. Toby wandered that path until he could look up through the hole. He stood turning, marveling at the hole and sky that he could see through it. Then he heard a noise somewhere in the cavern recesses and decided this was enough. He had to tell the others and convince them to come back with him and explore some more. And so he started walking back when he realized he wasn't sure which way to go. Paths went in all directions. And because the floor was uneven, or at least uneven rock, he couldn't tell which path he had come down. Despite that shaft of light, it had become too dark to make out small details once you moved a few yards in any direction. And so panic threatened to overtake him, but he managed to keep his calm and sat to think it through. He finally chose the path that he was fairly sure was the one he came in on, and then carefully walked down it. Time has a way of expanding, making seconds seem like hours when a person is disoriented and frightened. And so it was with Toby. And after what seemed like an eternity of wandering this tunnel, he felt air blowing against his face. Thinking he was almost out of the cavern, he quickened his steps and nearly fell down a craggy crevasse inside the cavern. He barely saved himself, hurting his knee and arm to keep from falling into that crevasse. This finally shook whatever calm Toby had, and he was panicked. He stumbled blindly back the way he had come and eventually found the cavern with the hole. He looked about but still could not determine which path was his. Then he remembered he could see the light here from just inside the passage, so he climbed one of the steep and sharp boulders to see if he could detect that entrance. But that rock was almost like a shard of glass, and Toby fell from the rock at a height of around 9 feet. Not a great height to be sure, but with all the jumbled boulders about, he took a glancing blow to his head and twisted his ankle in what would normally be a recoverable fall. So now Toby was dazed and in pain, bleeding from several cuts. Limping, he plunged along whatever path opened to him, falling from time to time, and then crying out in vain, hoping someone would hear him, and then bursting into alternative crying and laughing fits. He imagined monsters at every turn and behind every boulder, and suddenly, directly behind him, shrouded in darkness, Toby heard something breathing heavily. It was approaching slowly, and Toby wet his pants in blind fear. Later, Toby would swear that whatever was in there had spoke to him, saying, "I smell your blood, and it smells good to me." Toby screamed and ran as hard as he could, bouncing off boulders and walls, adding injury at every turn. Toby didn't know how long he had been running through the tunnels and caverns, but finally he saw the light at the opening and staggered out. He lay quiet for several minutes, just glad to be out. Then he got up and against great pain ran as best as he could back to that camp. It was nearly sunset when Corey and Tyler, who had been out searching and were also headed back to the camp for the long walk to the highway to get help, heard Toby screaming, crying, and laughing hysterically as he ran blindly through the bush. Both Tyler and Corey said Toby was incoherent and didn't recognize them. They had to tackle him and hold him until he calmed down enough to let him go. They hastily broke camp, Toby useless as in dementia, and then drove him to a hospital. The ride was very long and nerve-wracking. Toby would doze only to awaken screaming and hollering incoherently. Once there, the staff took Toby in and notified the local authorities. Tyler and Corey could not relate much and could only stand by helplessly as their friend slipped in and out of this tortured consciousness. Tyler called Toby's parents and told them what had happened, and Toby's mother left on the next flight to Australia. The authorities tried to question Toby a few times, but he remained delusional and unresponsive. There was little anyone could do but hope that Toby could recover. The doctor said Toby was near exhaustion and a little dehydrated, and his injuries, while serious, were not life-threatening and would heal well. The injury of most concern was the blow to that head. The doctor feared that it may have caused some damage, but only further testing could tell. 2 days later, Toby's mother arrived and found her son more calm, but still apt to have nightmares and episodes of demented behavior. The test showed Toby had suffered a minor concussion, but no permanent damage was found. The doctor said Toby could go home in a few days. He had no answer as to why Toby was irrational and incoherent at times, but felt this too would pass. Tyler and Corey hesitantly told Toby's mother about what the locals had related about where the boys had camped at. The authorities told her that these things happened to people who were lucky enough to come out of the Black Mountain alive. Toby's mother made the arrangements for Toby and herself to fly home on Toby's release. Tyler and Corey would forgo the rest of the vacation and then fly home as well. Once back in Nebraska, Toby underwent extensive physical, neurological, and psychiatric testing, but no conclusive diagnosis was made concerning his mental state. Time did work to heal Toby, and the nightmares eventually became few and far between. He was finally able to tell his entire story, often becoming agitated and upset, but he was able to resume his life and lead a fairly normal existence. However, there were times, unspecific and random, when Toby would swear that whatever was behind them in that cave had followed him and was waiting for the right moment to strike. When this happened, Toby regressed to his state of that day back in the caverns. He stated that when he entered that mountain area, he became cursed, and that he was sure the mountain or something within it was bound and determined to take his life, the life that got away. 4 years later, Toby was walking in the cornfield behind his parents' house. No one was there to hear if he screamed. No one saw what happened. All that is known is that Toby died out there, a look of unbated terror on his face, hands still clawed into the ground as if he was trying to escape something. And then that's it. That's everything associated with Chapter 7 of the Through a Mystic Glass book. So let's go ahead and let's talk about that here. Pretty scary encounter, no, when it comes to this experience, whatever Toby was having there in those infamous Black Mountains. As I mentioned, I've talked about a video related to that type of mysteria there, so on my channel. So when you have a chance, check out the link below. Maybe you'll see some similarities there. But you can't really blame both Toby and his two friends. They wanted to go to Australia. They had saved up 2 years worth of whatever type of income that they could to do so. They were going to stay there for a while too. What was it, at least a month or so? And they wanted to specifically check out the places that tourists normally didn't go to. And that way they would see a bunch of things that others wouldn't normally see. It's too bad though that eventually this interest caught them going to that infamous Black Mountain. And again, I can't blame them because I would be in that situation too. Someone tells me, hey, this is an area that's cursed. This is an area that has some bad juju. I would try to go see it, keeping my respectful distance and making sure that nothing else obviously causes me grief afterward, but I would definitely still try to go see it. But what I wouldn't do was obviously what Toby was doing, and that is go well deep into the actual mountain itself. Whatever, even if there wasn't any curses there, that's dangerous. Obviously, with it being dark in there and any type of cavern suddenly looking the same around every single corner, you would be hopelessly lost. That's why I never go like deep into any type of forest that I'm not familiar with, or deep into any type of deserts out there in the Las Vegas area when I'm on tours and so on. I don't want to be in that situation. But poor Toby did do that, and then when that happened, that's when he met what was considered that haunted man, that evil man, the one associated with that legend. Whoever this person was, this quote unquote terrible medicine man, they apparently dwell within that mountain. I don't know again if that's supernatural or if that's something else. And again, it could just be placebos, like people's own endorphins kicking in and then creating all this imaginary stuff. But knowing what I've seen as well when it comes to the world, or the other world, like as far as ghosts and spirits, those things truly are alive. So why not have something like this involving this type of medicine man, still an evil one no less, living within those mountains, shape-shifting, just basically waiting for anyone and anything to be able to go there into those mountains and again become hopelessly lost. In fact, I got the impression that it's almost like it's tantalizing people to go in, showcasing the best angles, the ones that look like, hey, you're going to make it in a certain way, but you'll be easily able to get out, no problems. And then, of course, that's when they become trapped in there. How about all those people as well? Dr. David Marsh illustrated several paragraphs of people that have all gone into that mountain, not a single one of them found ever again. It's as if they were swallowed alive. It's as if they never existed on the earth there. So crazy stuff to think that they were even tempting something along those lines. The two other guys, Corey and Tyler, were right. Toby, unfortunately, did not heed their caution, and then he spent most of that day trapped there. I believe that he did meet this ill-fated medicine man, whoever that was. I believe that this medicine man was causing him to become disoriented, eventually in that darkness, just basically bouncing off of walls, causing his injuries at the right place at the right time, to the point where he was just going into that crying and hysteria and laughing fits. And then finally, he was able to escape, probably out of sheer luck. I imagine that he would have become another mysterious victim lost forever to those mountains. But ultimately, yes, if you believe the curse associated with that mountain, that medicine man probably followed Toby home. And then when that happened, he was able to finally claim him somewhere out there again in some cornfield. What a creepy way to end that chapter too. Somewhere out there in that cornfield, wherever it was, that's where Toby finally met his maker, whoever this medicine man was, and he chased him one final time. Look of sheer terror on his face. Crazy stuff. But again, and let me know what your comments are with regards to this story. Anybody there from the Australia area know about this Black Mountain? Maybe more information on a local level? Please post those comments below. And as always, check out my other chapters too if you wanted to see more information on this book. I'll be wrapping up this next set of chapters sometime soon. All right, everyone. Thanks again as always. Take care. Bye.